Thank you all for attending the Opportunities in Nuclear Supply Chains panel session at the Make UK National Manufacturing Conference. There we go. This is run by Make UK Defence, and you'll notice that in a change from previously advertised, I'm not in fact Andrew Kinneborough, our Director General, who's otherwise occupied giving evidence to the Defence Select Committee in Westminster, or giving evidence in Scotland Yard, one of the two. I always forget which one. I just barely read the notes. However, you have myself, Dan Parvaz, who has been now with the organisation just over a year, about 13 months. Slightly less Scottish, just as bearded, so hopefully I can do just as good a job as Andrew. And I'll be chairing your session for the day, where we have some fantastic experts from the nuclear industry to help demystify the sector, really. This is a fantastic phrase that came up in our discussions prior to this session. And hopefully you take a lot from this session, learn that it's not as scary as it seems. So like I was saying, I've been with Make UK Defence for just over a year now, and with the ongoing geopolitical situations, some would say chaos, I wouldn't say that, the organisation has grown a lot in the past year. I've been brought on, my colleagues Helen and Stuart have also been brought on as our membership has grown. We are delivering great content, regular networking events, face-to-face networking events. That's really what we live for, is helping you make connections within the defence sector. And if you would like to learn a bit more about that, we're at stand 30 downstairs. Find any of us with the Make UK Defence shirts on and have a chat about how we can help you bridge that gap and get into the sector. So, I got to thank our panellists again. This is actually the third time that we've run this panel, the first two being at our annual summit last November. And they'll be pleased to know, in an ongoing commitment to our ESG credentials, we will be recycling the same jokes and conversation as last time. I see Tom painfully wincing at that one. I'm actually not lying on that. Is it the second or third time I've said that one? Great. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce, or I would let our panellists introduce themselves. There you go. So if we start with Tom at the end, please. If you could let us know who you are.
Yes, thank you, Dan. I'm Tom Greatrex. I'm Chief Executive of the Nuclear Industry Association, which is the UK trade association for civil nuclear. So we do power from building new stuff, operating the existing ones, decommissioning the old ones, a little bit on medicine, and other related things. Lots of work with our international counterparts on sort of the big push for nuclear policy, but it's in the sort of mostly power, a little bit of medicine. Increasingly, though, and I can see that from people who are in this room this afternoon, faces that I recognise, that the difference or the distinction between nuclear defence and nuclear civil is becoming less defined. Companies working across both, looking to opportunities across both, and as recent events that got a lot of attention in relation to defence, also recent announcements in the last 2 or 3 weeks on civil nuclear as well demonstrate there is, for I think the first time that I can remember, I've been doing this for 9 years, so a bit longer than 13 months, but 9 years that I've been involved in this, a very strong sense of there being an open opportunity for the supply chain to really make some big calls and get some big rewards from it in both defence and civil in the next period, because it's a pretty crucial period in both areas.
Great, thank you, Tom. Vince?
I'm Vince Middleton, Chairman of Nuclear Energy Components, which basically does what it says in its name. We currently manufacture AGR, advanced gas-cooled reactors, stringer components, i.e. fueling components for the UK fleet of reactors. We, as a business and a family, started in the early 1950s in the nuclear sector, and I've been in it all the way through. So I've been in it for a lot of years now, more than I care to think. Basically, over that time, we've stayed true to the nuclear industry all the way through that period since the early 50s. But we've also been in defence, land, sea and air, and most other sectors across a broad spread of nearly everything from food and drink all the way through to glass manufacture and everything else. Probably the two things that I've got at the moment, that I've got Tom on the right from the NIA and Make UK Defence, and they are probably the two trade bodies that I've associated with and believe in. So it's good to be here. I'd like to apologise for not wearing a suit for this esteemed and auspicious occasion, but I'm glad to see that as a nuclear safety, the thought process of someone taking a piece of cord and tying a slip knot in it and putting it round your neck every morning doesn't appeal. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you, Vince. Scott?
Morning, everyone. My name's Scott Milburn, and I am the Business Development Manager for Darkham Engineering, focused on both the nuclear and the oil and gas sector. Quite a busy man, as you can imagine. My background, briefly, I have a background in oil and gas and offshore wind, and now I've transferred over to the nuclear within the past 2 years with Darker. So I'm still relatively fresh into the nuclear industry. However, based on my experience in oil and gas and offshore wind, I can see a lot of comparisons, to be honest. And I can say this now that I'm not really in those industries, but nuclear is very much the most exciting industry that I've ever worked in, especially at the moment. A bit about Darkham. Darkham have been in the nuclear industry for over 50 years. We have our metallic insulation product installed in over 180 and counting. I can't miss that bit. It is my job. I can't miss that bit. 180 and counting nuclear power plants globally. So we've got a very rich history in what we do. And currently, a bit of what we're doing now, we're currently executing multiple scopes on the HPC project. And hopefully we're starting the transition over to Sizewell C, as well as the very exciting opportunity that SMRs and AMRs pose. We do a lot of work in the defence industry. However, for today's session, my focus and commentary will maybe be around civil nuclear and the SMR technology risk.
Fantastic. Thanks, Scott. And then you might have noticed the eagle-eyed among you, a slight other change in the lineup for today. Instead of Nathan, we actually have Nick Franklin, also from AWE. You're going to have to work hard to grow a beard as glorious as that, Nathan.
I think that's with an hour's notice, unfortunately, I have not been able to replicate them and show up there. But good morning. My name is Nick Franklin. I'm head of off-site capability for the Australia programme at AWE. So a couple of things there. So firstly, AWE, what are we? Well, we are responsible for the warhead element of the UK's nuclear deterrent. And obviously anyone who's watching the news at the moment will realise that that's quite in focus, given events in Eastern Europe in particular. We also have a nuclear threat reduction arm, so we do other elements as opposed to just the warhead. And then the Australia programme itself. So what is the Australia programme? Well, we've been a programme of record now for a few years, and we are responsible for the replacement warhead element. So the UK is moving from one product to a second product. That's given us a number of challenges in the space that we operate in. So we're having to operate to very, very tight schedules, very tight timelines, and we're having to lean on suppliers that we haven't had to use or haven't had to think about as supply chain for a number of years. So we've had one product that's been in service for X period of time. We've been maintaining that. We haven't been looking at development. We haven't been looking at innovation. We haven't been looking at anything in that space. So we've kind of had to wake up from a bit of a slumber over a number of years. And we're very, very keen on working really closely with particularly UK PLC, UK suppliers, and particularly the SMEs, where we can see some real innovation that can hopefully help with our timeline challenges. Very, very keen to be part of the discussion today. So thank you for having me at last minute.
No problem at all, Nick. I think Nathan has kind of dropped you in it there. He's attending the dinner later, I think, isn't he? But not the panel session. So
yeah, I believe that's the case. Yes.
The smartest guy not in the room. Looking at I don't envy the what's happened there. I don't envy the cold start that you're having to go through there, but definitely an exciting time, an interesting time for the nuclear supply chain. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a bit of moderated discussion. So we're going to pose a few questions to our panelists, lend us their expertise, and then after that we'll move into a bit of a Q&A session from the audience, where we'll hopefully have a roving mic to go around and answer all of your questions. So starting with the small ones, Tom. What's the biggest challenge, do you think, in the sector? What keeps you up at night?
Well, I think we're in an interesting time frame, and this isn't an exact repeat from what we said in November, although it's probably quite similar in the sense that in terms of the civil nuclear programme, we've had a change of government, we haven't had a change of policy, which is good. You know, very strongly supportive of an understanding of the need for civil nuclear as part of the future power mix. But we are in that position where we're awaiting some decisions that are tied up with the spending review. So the final investment decision on Sizewell C that Scott referred to is due to be this summer, I think. Tied in the spending review, we've got the ongoing and coming towards a conclusion process for selection of which small modular reactor technology will be deployed first through Great British Nuclear. But then, since November, what we've had, interestingly, and it started more in the US, but it's now very real here, is a number of what I sort of refer to as energy-intensive industries of the future, and the present and the future, as opposed to what people think of as energy-intensive industries, so data centres, AI, etc., where increasingly those entities are looking to procure their own supplies of carbon-free, reliable, long-term power. And that's had a very different effect on a whole range of different areas, on the finance community, investors, because you look at companies like those that have very healthy balance sheets, and they're not there because they've got an ideological commitment to nuclear. They're there because they want secure, reliable power that they can run their businesses off and make their margins from. And looking to procure their own is really changing quite a lot of the arena, particularly for some of the advanced reactor technologies as well as SMR technologies. So is that keeping me up at night? Well, it sort of is, in a sense of anticipation that, people who've heard me speak before may have heard me say things like this, but it does really feel like we're on the verge of something really quite exciting and significant. Got challenges within it, how we managed to do it all, but that's a much better place to be than the challenges we might have been thinking about 4 or 5 years ago, which were at the other end.
Absolutely fantastic. Yeah, last time we discussed there was so many projects just on the verge of about to be announced or continued, and it's great to see these start to come through. Vince, how are you feeling about this from an SME perspective? What are your concerns?
My concern, Tom's right, it's very exciting that basically it might be taken into the private sector effectively to fulfil individual business energy needs. I still have, having been in it a long time and rather jaundiced. Do I need to be closer? How close do I need to be? Feeling rather jaundiced over time. I still feel that everyone that was brought up in the 80s and 90s has probably got an unconscious bias against nuclear. And I still think that pervades through society and through what are classes as civil service and government. But it's quite interesting that younger generations have got a far more agnostic view to it and basically just see it as a clean energy source. So I'm hopeful that over time, and it will still take time, that as a nation we might move faster towards nuclear.
Fantastic. Scott, if you want to bring your mic a little bit closer as well to make sure it's picking you up. How about Darkham?
Yeah, so speaking from, bring it down a level, from a manufacturing organisation, the barriers to work in the nuclear industry, I'll put it bluntly, if nuclear is not part of your core business strategy, I would be so far to say it's probably not for you. There's a lot of barriers to work in, but it's a very exciting, I don't want to say lucrative industry to work in, for good reason. In terms of some of the barriers, security clearance requirements are one, especially in the defence sector. There's no easy way around that. You have to adopt that, both on a worker level and also on a organisation level as well. And there's also the challenges around the nuclear safety culture. This must be ingrained within your organisation, and this governs your day-to-day, hour-by-hour manufacturing processing. And that is not a small undertaking, I'll be completely honest. And for me, if I was in your guys' shoes, which I am, I'm out there looking for new business, I'd have nuclear written in my long-term business plan. I go so far as to say I'd have it written in my medium to long-term business plan. Again, I'll put my neck on the line, 3 to 5 years. Put my neck on the line, 3 to 5 years, manufacturing in your organisations in nuclear industry, civil and SMR. I firmly believe that is the future.
Great, thank you. So we've heard from a civil standpoint. Nick, what challenges are AWE facing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think firstly I'd want to echo the excitement from Tom. I think it really is, a sector that's growing. We've got a huge number of opportunities coming, which is the positive side of it. Some of the challenges that's already been alluded to. So security clearance absolutely is something we can't get away from. That is plain and simply the fact of the matter.
But what we're really keen to do is look at how we can break down some of those challenges, because put simply, it's easier to get someone security clearance than it is to teach someone how to do the skill set that you could bring to the table. So we're really starting to flip that on its head a bit and look at how we can work with organisations to help them through that process of getting the security clearance, both at individual staff level and then bringing it to the organisations. Can we look at setting up clusters and hubs where you could clear one building and have multiple suppliers work in it? Because we recognise that the barrier to entry of cost of clearing a facility can actually preclude small, medium enterprises from wanting to get involved in the sort of endeavour that we're looking to partake in. So for me, that's probably the first challenge that we're looking to break down. I think the second one is really a regular pipeline of work, because we're asking small, medium enterprises to invest, and investment needs some sort of guarantee that there's something at the end of it for that investment to be valid and viable for shareholders and for companies. So we're really looking at how do we do things differently to present long-term partnering opportunities to come into AWE, be part of our future, work with us, and really have that collaborative sharing of ideas, but more importantly, helping you guys to shape that investment that we need to rely upon. So I think in summary, that's probably where we're at the moment in the defence space.
Great, thank you. So comments from both Scott and Nick there on nuclear needing to be part of your strategy, making sure you've got security clearance, part of the overall business strategy. That's what I get for putting my notes on top of the mouse pad. What does that look from your side, Tom, in terms of the strategy? What do you see companies doing? How can people start building that into your company strategy, especially if you're completely new to the nuclear sector?
Well, I could give you a glib answer, which is, if you're not already members, join Make UK, join NIA, and we can help you navigate that. But I mean, there is a serious point to that too, actually, which is, like, if you're not involved in either and you're looking to get involved in either, they are both senses and in the crossover. I always regard them as quite a supportive community of supply chain and companies from primes all the way through. It's something that's, I think, is almost unique in this area, in that there's such a sense of desire to get things done and do them well, and the fact that you can only really do that with cooperation and collaboration, that it seems to feed its way through the whole of that sector. So don't automatically think that every other company that's involved, even if they might feel like or look like, because of what they do, they're a direct competitor, that they aren't necessarily going to be helpful or supportive. And that probably the way that most of that happens is through the various different organisations and collaborations that we have. Because, look, in both areas, as we've already alluded to, there's a lot to get done in a relatively short period of time, and at a period where I don't think there's ever been a greater sense of urgency coming from the sort of public end of this as well. So despite the frustrations that sort of Vince alluded to, I feel as though actually in the public sphere we've got much more commitment and interest, and in a capital constrained world from a government perspective, desire to try to help where they can, than we've had for a very, very long period of time. So getting involved, don't feel it's daunting. Don't feel as though companies that are already involved won't help, because they can and they will. And there are communities around to help you do that. And that's, I think, my main message from this, is that you might see all these different organisations with N in the title. It's not that hard to navigate around to find the ones that will help you. We're one of them, and more than happy to talk to anybody who's looking at this and thinking about it, about ways in, how you can familiarise yourselves, who the main people to be in touch with are, because there's a huge appetite there.
Yeah, fantastic. So really seek out peer groups. You're not in this alone. Find out what other people are doing.
And don't think they're not going to be supportive or helpful, because actually my experience is, actually in many cases they are. Fantastic.
And Vince?
I think echoing that basically, if you look at the decommissioning sector, it's a new sphere. It's basically, they're looking for innovation. They're looking for small, innovative companies that can come up with solutions for what they've got. So that's probably one good target market. I would say, yes, certainly the NIA, and just stay within that group of people that talk about it all the time. From the defence side, from part of our strategy is to get into the defence side. Make UK can help with security clearances. So there's a route there that they can help with the security clearances. There is the cultural side to it, but that is something you've just got to get into. It's right or it's wrong. As I say, we've not had a concession in the last 20, 25 years. It's either right or it's wrong. Concessions don't exist. So it's a world where it is a black and white world, and the safety culture is just it's ingrained in everybody in your business. So you can achieve it, but it's got to come from the top and the bottom and just exist right through your business. So.
Great. I'm going to pick on Scott now because you brought up the having nuclear ingrained in your business strategy. What does Darkem's strategy look like, and how would you go about ingraining that in your culture? How does that look?
There's two elements to it for Darkem. The first one, it's been mentioned a lot today, skills. Look at myself, I transferred from oil and gas and offshore wind and came into nuclear. It's a lot of the same skill sets. Yes, I'm not on the shop floor manufacturing, but I'm out there trying to generate new business for Darkem. However, on the shop floor, it's long-term, well-paid jobs with the high, for Darkem in particular, the welding skill sets that we need. Those people are hard to find. And even a company the size of Darkem, roughly we do £180 million a year turnover. It's difficult to keep the skill sets. It really is. There's such a shortage of skills. I know Steph mentioned it earlier. I don't want to repeat what Steph said, but re-emphasise that point. There is such a shortage of good skill sets. But it's long-term, attractive, well-paid jobs. And just to touch on a point that Tom mentioned, on the civil nuclear, especially the SMR side, if I was a new organisation, a start-up or an existing organisation, offshore wind or oil and gas, transitioning to nuclear, don't be overawed by the demands of working in nuclear. There is opportunity and very good contracting opportunities within the civil nuclear sector in particular. You've got to look at your subcontracting methods, your balance of plants, your site services, things like that. Not everything is nuclear island. There is contracting opportunities to go at the tier ones, tier twos, learn your trade essentially, and then build up that long-term strategy and build up that nuclear safety culture that way. If you take one bit of advice away for me sitting in your shoes as well, that'd be the one thing I'd say. Go and look at the balance of plant elements of a civil nuclear, Sizewell C, HPC build up your knowledge and experience and minimise your risk.
Great, thank you. And Nick, obviously working with AW on a slightly different side of nuclear, how do you feel?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the key thing for us is resilience. So I think if you've looked geopolitically, what's happened in East Europe, we're here for a long time, and we need our supply chain to be resilient. What I mean by that is we're not looking for quick fire competitions. We're looking for long term. We're looking for collaboration. We're looking for partnerships, and we're actually looking for people to work together. So for me, things like Make UK, and I know again it's a little bit of a glib answer, but these conferences are absolutely invaluable for us. We're new as an organisation to coming out. We've sort of hidden under a rock for 30 years. We're now emerging from that rock and coming out, and this is a really great way for us to meet a whole number of people in fairly quick succession. We can build the rapport, build the relationships, and then look to build upon that. And I think to pick on your piece with skill sets as well, again, absolutely for us, it's an enduring program. So we need suppliers who have got people coming in, apprentice programs, graduate programs, that long-term route to SWEP staff, because there's no getting away from it. If you look across AWE, it's an ageing demographic. We've got a lot of key skills retiring before our programs are coming to fruition, and we absolutely need to be doing something to plug that gap. We very much see industry as part of that. So we're here. Please speak to us. There's certain things that we can't say for good reason, but where we can, we're very much looking to start those conversations and look to break down a lot of those myths and barriers to entry.
Great, thank you. We've also started to touch upon skills. It's kind of the elephant in every room, it seems. So let's dwell on that for a little bit. In terms of kind of skills, accreditations, I mean, what kind of skills do you need to enter the nuclear sector? What kind of accreditations? What does your business need to look like? Is it as scary as it might seem on the surface, or is it a lot easier? Shall we, Vince, would you like to start, and then we'll go to Tom?
Our experience is we've been in it a long time, and we've never really been questioned of our capabilities, of our experience. We are just ISO 9000 approved. We go way beyond that with regard to the systems we've got and the cultural nature of the business, and so we don't really get questioned. As a new start, people will be saying, oh, well, you need to be this and you need to be that, and I think there is a challenge in that. As I say, there's things like, I don't know where we stand with the Fit for Nuclear programme at the moment, but that basically takes what you do and looks at it as a cultural aspect as well, just to see if you are ready for that. But I don't know if that's going to continue, so that's there. I think just the whole idea of working in the sector is a bit daunting to people, because I think it goes beyond that. But it's no more than the civil aerospace, things like that. If you want to get into it, one of my things at the moment would be go and talk to the fusion crew, because they're effectively a bit of a new start. If you can make them bits, they'll like you.
Fantastic. And
so,
oh no, thank you, Vince. Any more?
Oh, well, the only other comment I would make is that from a defence point of view, having done various projects with AWA over years, the fact that they're actually out in public is a massive change for the whole sector. The fact that they are actually standing up in front of people, because otherwise they never existed a few years ago.
Yeah, very much.
It
So.
feels like a tide is turning. So, Tom, the NIA, obviously you work with a lot of organisations within the nuclear sector. Is there a common thread that unites all of these, like common accreditations? What is the thing that all of these organisations have? We've already talked about the kind of the commitment and the long-term strategy, but what kind of brings them together?
Well, I'm not sure that there's necessarily a thread of accreditation that runs through. I think actually it's more simple than that. It's what Vince just said. You know, if you can make them stuff, they like you. That is true of fusion. It's true of large-scale nuclear. It's true of SMR. It's true of AMR. It's true of decommissioning. It's true all the way through, actually. And so I maybe a bit heresy to say this, but I don't think you need to get too hung up on accreditations. What you need to be more focused on is demonstrating what you're able to do and how that can be applied to nuclear, because sometimes people think of nuclear as being a very, and particularly civil, maybe defence as well, a very sort of small c conservative world where we don't ever do anything differently than how we've done it since 1956. That might have been, possibly, you might have thought that was the case a few years ago, but that isn't the case now. You know, innovation in every aspect of what we do is something which is very highly sought after. It obviously needs to, meet and fit within the point, for very good reason, the sort of safety culture that other panellists have referred to a number of times. But that doesn't mean you can't do things that come from other sectors, that where other sectors have learned that can be then applied into civil nuclear. And there is an appetite for that. There's absolutely an appetite for that within the NDA, within EDF and Sizewell C, and I'm sure within whoever of the final four will be the SMR technologies that are going to be deployed next. So that's where I think your focus is much better, rather than getting too hung up on which accreditations. One thing I should say as well, two things. Firstly, on Fit for Nuclear, there may be others in the room that can explain where that is a bit more, but just to say that although there's been some changes around with AMRC, nuclear AMRC and various other things changing, I think the intention is to find a way of being able to continue Fit for Nuclear. I think that's right, or try to, and that's not quite finalised yet, but that is, hopefully that will be around to be able to continue to help people with that sort of introductory level to what nuclear is like. The other thing on some of the supply chain qualification, one of the things that we're working on with others is and with GBN, Great British Nuclear, is trying to find a way of having a much more straightforward, simple portal of that. So you don't have to do it again and again and again and again with each ever different potential supplier that there may well be out there. And that's something where, because, going back to the start of this, the skills shortage, the amount that needs to be done in a relatively short period of time, there's much more appetite amongst those prime contractors to be able to be part of that than there might have been a few years ago. So I'm quite optimistic that we can move that forward in a way that's going to be helpful for people coming into the sector.
Great, fantastic, thank you. Shaking things up and starting down with this end. In terms of security clearance, this is obviously one of the big things looming over the sector. We know you have to have a reason to go for security clearance, but how could an organisation begin these conversations? I mean, will they get the notice from you, and then how can a company gear up to start getting its personnel cleared?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, Dan. Really good question. So in the past, it was tied to needing to have a live contract before you could kick off the process. So what that essentially meant, if you break it down to its constituent parts, was for us, we would have a minimum of 12-week delay before any contract started, because by definition, you'd have to be then starting to put the people through clearances. We're looking to try and change that. So now we can work together with organisations like Make UK and others to start sponsoring clearances early. That enables people to get the clearances in place, to have the conversations around what the work can look like and shaping the contracts. So that's one way that's helped. Another way is working through primes. So again, a lot of the primes have got long-term frameworks within AWE already. So working with themselves, they can look to put the clearances in place for sub-tier suppliers underneath that. So those are probably two of the easiest ways. Candidly, there is no getting away from it, so we recognise that we do need them. So the other element that we are looking to address is the timelines involved in getting those clearances as well. So we're looking to work with the organisations that actually do the clearances to try and speed that process up, both for SC and for DV clearances, which is obviously the tier above that you need for a lot of the work within AWE. So we are trying to improve the process, but the real key to this is really getting that process kicked off as early as possible. And what I would say as well is working with the organisations, it's building up that pool of talent with the clearances, because that really helps shape the offerings that from both ways. So it enables the conversation to be a lot more detailed around the requirements, around what we need, around what we're looking for, and then in turn it will allow industry to bring those ideas, because you can have the right people in the right room by getting the clearances early. So that's really how we're looking to tackle it. It's not perfect, but hopefully it steps in the right direction. And to Tom's and Vince's point, we are coming out 5 years ago. This wouldn't have been thinkable for AWE, so it is a massive step change in behaviour. So I think in summary, it's baby steps at the moment, but we are really looking to try and see how we can drive that forward. So any ideas that anyone on the floor may have, please let me know afterwards, because we will flow those back and see if we can incorporate them in.
Thank you. And then Scott and Vince, how does that look from the supplier side, from an SME viewpoint?
From the darker perspective, we have different people within the organisation have different security clearance levels. So we don't all have to go and get the top security clearance. Not everybody within Darkham organisation needs a security clearance, so I'll bust that myth right from the very get-go. It's certain people who are involved in the projects, mainly on the shop floor, that require different security clearances. So there's guys there on the shop floor who've got very high security clearance compared to myself. If you don't need it, don't get it, essentially. Don't spend the money, don't waste the time. So it can be managed, and again, I encourage you to reach out to AWE, reach out to Make UK and NIA, and get advice and support on what you need and what you're doing, and be open with them. You're not going to get anywhere if you're not open to saying, this is the opportunity I'm looking at, what advice and guidance can you give me with regards to clearance? That's the only way we're going to bust this myth and progress forward. Thank you. Vince?
Yeah, over time, our business has morphed in and out of defence. Basically, one of the first projects we did was for, I'll say something that was supposed to fly, but not fly very far. Basically, I think we were halfway through the programme before anyone actually questioned whether we were cleared or not.
I shouldn't say that out loud.
Which then prompted everyone going through security clearance in the entire business. At the moment, we've got relatively low security clearance, and we're looking for Make UK to actually help us with that.
Cool.
But we need a need. We need a need.
Well, Nick sat right there.
Thanks very much.
No pressure, Nick.
Tom, do you have any thoughts? How can, from the personnel side, obviously a challenge?
Well, so on the civil side, security clearance isn't the same. So it's not as it's not really an issue very much at all, really. So I think that's more in the defence side, but it doesn't mean it's unhelpful when you're then going for things to know that you've got levels of clearance for various different things. It probably gives a bit of psychological comfort in some areas, but it isn't in the same way a prerequisite or something that you need to necessarily definitely have before being involved in some of the civil stuff.
Yeah, no, fantastic and great to know as well. Could hopefully save people some time. Coming up to more current events, we've had a lot of news recently. Government has committed to additional defence spending over by next Parliament. We're going up to 3%, I believe, which is the goal. Do we think that the nuclear sector will see much of this, or do you think it will be diverted to kind of land, sea and air? What would we expect? Nick?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, candidly, it gives us assurance that the money we knew we were getting, we will get. Most of our budgets are done for longer periods of time, so I don't envisage there being a wild change. I think a lot of what was announced is probably going to go to more conventional than it will to the nuclear sector. But I think what it does give us is assurance that the money that we were planning on getting and the money that we're planning on spending will be ring-fenced and will be secured. So it gives us that confidence that we're not going to be at risk of haircuts or budget cuts. So it definitely is a positive, and we're viewing it as that. And we're out of these events for that reason, because we're confident that the money is there.
Great. And Scott?
Overall, it is a positive step. However, for Darkham and at a manufacturing level, it's probably too early to tell, I would say. And time will tell. The coming weeks, months will come out, and whatever will be, will be. But what I would say is, from a Darkham perspective and the size of organisation we're very heavy on succession planning for events like this. So when that's attracting skill sets into your organisation, maintaining and keeping those skill sets for events like this, when you may need to ramp up and reallocate skill sets, which is very, very hard from an operational perspective, absolutely. But we do plan for this type of event, and succession planning is something that I encourage you guys to think about because of what's happening now.
Thank you. And Vince?
I wholly support any increase in defence spending. I think its primary goal of the government is to defend the nation. With regard to it, I think, as Nick says, AWE will secure the funding. I think probably talking to Tom earlier, probably from the decommissioning side, they'll probably extend that out. I think there'll be some money taken from that. I just hope it doesn't come from the SMR build programme side. So.
Thank you. And Tom?
I think it's really interesting because 4 or 5 weeks ago, November when we had the similar panel and discussion, so prior to that announcement from a couple of weeks ago on defence spending, prior to announcements that were made about 3 weeks ago on unblocking various things in relation to civil nuclear, prior to that period, I don't think the things that we were having to get done in a very relatively short period were already there. We knew that. I think I tend to agree with Nick about this. I think actually what it's doing is just giving another level of confidence that these things aren't going to not happen now. Yeah. Even if more of the difference between current spending and the 3% target in the next Parliament may well go to other things, to I think air, land, sea, etc. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be taken from areas in relation to nuclear. So I think that should give people some confidence that this is real. And I think the other thing that's interesting about it is, and Vince just sort of touched on this, is the reflection that has, or the change that has in public perception and public support. I think it was quite hard to think of a time other than people involved in it, even 6 months ago, where you'd have people openly saying, yes, we should be spending more on defence, it's really important, and it's important because look how dangerous the world is. I think people's minds have been focused a bit on that, at the same time as they've been focused on the importance of energy security, and those two things together are, I think, what should give us a lot of confidence that what we're talking about today is not all a dream of something that might happen. It actually is happening. It's starting to happen, and I don't think that whilst other areas will be under pressure in terms of public spending, I think in these areas, because of the nature of the incredible importance and underpinning of society, be it security or reliability of energy supply, they're absolutely needed and they need to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think something that came up from our previous discussions and our briefings was the kind of the uncertainty and the awaiting decisions, and I think this announcement gives that certainty, or at least the pretense of that certainty, to know that things are going to go ahead. And the same can be said of the defence sector as a whole, really. There's a number of other defence initiatives that were awaiting the results of the strategic defence review, and with the knowledge of increased spending, hopefully that gives a bit more of a reassurance to our SME members that are heavily involved in those supply chains. So one more question from myself, then I will stop grilling you and hand it over to the floor. Something else that we've seen is the establishment of an SME office or within the defence sector and the definition of spending targets with SMEs as part of the defence supply chain. Will this affect your business? Will you be doing anything differently? And Nick, I'm going to drop you in it again.
Yeah, no problem. So, I mean, first things first, I think, that can only be seen as a positive. I don't think there's any debate or discussion to be had around that at all. I think it's absolutely a positive thing. Will it change how we do business? Yes and no. So we were already absolutely targeting how we improve, how we work with SMEs. That was already in train prior to this. I think it gives us a bit of a framework to work within, which again is a positive thing. But I think it's already something that's absolutely key to how AWE is going to look to do business going forward. We absolutely need the innovation of SMEs. We need those ideas. We need those brought to the table, and we need to find ways of working together with SMEs. So it hasn't changed our strategy because it was already there, but it absolutely crystallises that and gives us something to work within.
Great, thank you, Scott.
At Darkham's level, it won't be a game changer for us. We actively engage SMEs in the North East anyway, and part of the new ISO standard is encouraging that local supply chain as well, and the nuclear standard into the supply chain. So we already do that as part of our kind of modus operandi and our strategy anyway. So it's just a positive reinforcement that we are doing the right thing for us.
Great, and Vince?
It's got to be viewed as a positive. We've been talking about this through Make UK Defence and its predecessor NDI for probably 15, 20 years now.
Now it's here.
And there's got to be a methodology because the reporting mechanisms for capturing the information, I've always said it should be put back on the ONS. We fill surveys in as SMEs every quarter or whatever we do them. Just ask us what sectors we are committed to and what we're getting spends in from UK primes and things like that. So there's got to be a better way of mechanism of reporting it than going, as we've done previously, going through the primes and saying, well, how much do you spend?
No, absolutely.
It's a further debate for Make UK Defence, I'm afraid.
No, and as we can see, Andrew is actually in Westminster at the moment, so your views are taken to the corridors of power, so you're not afraid of letting us know your opinion, Vince, so we'll have to start writing these down at some point. And Tom, only good news for your members, I presume?
Yeah, look, people who have worked or do work in the NDA estate, for example, will be familiar with there being the NDA have what they call a socio-economic duty, which is broadly about encouraging and trying to maximise the level of SME involvement in aspects of work, particularly around Sellafield, and so a lot of that coming from Cumbria and the northwest as an example. But it's also true of, if you look at Hinckley, Hinckley, big part of the case, the push to get the final investment decision on Sizewell, looking at Hinckley, is the impact it has on the economy regionally, and within that, how much of that is from SMEs. And across the piece, as I said before, the innovation, the agility that can come from SMEs is something which is prized. Now, that means there needs to be the right level of support and help, because the ability to be able to make big investments is much more constrained in SMEs than perhaps in some larger entities. And so that circle has to be squared a bit. But I think I would view this as being a very positive step, but also, frankly, a step that's there because I think there's a broad understanding that the real game-changing, significant impact you're going to get is probably going to come significantly from SMEs or be developed within SMEs that then might become part of larger entities, and that's what the prize is.
Great, fantastic. Now, sorry guys, time to throw you to the wolves. Do we have our roving mics around? Does anybody have any questions from the audience to our panel? No. Michael, just down at the front there.
Is there a mic?
Oh. Don't worry, we got all the time in the world.
Hello, I'm Michael Krajewski. Thank you very much for sharing the insights, but I'd like to dig a bit deeper. Me, myself, I've sold a successful manufacturing business 2 years ago, and I'm now looking for new opportunities. You mentioned there's a desperate need for various things. Are you able to share what is it? Is it materials, products, capabilities? Because I've got the luxury of starting afresh, and with some investment, I could really address the issue. So if you could just share a little bit of insights as to what is it that you are after. Thank you.
Would you like to address that to anyone, or should we let everyone take a stab? Should we go, Vince?
Anyone that feels they can answer and give some insights. Thank you.
So Vince, how would you go about helping finding new suppliers and onboarding them?
If I look at it from if I was to set up a business now, which is you want to do in manufacturing. My drivers would be, certainly in this sector and in the defence sector, is if you're going to make for print, i.e. if you're going to make your own product and come up with something wonderful, then that's a different thing. But if you're going to make other people's products like AWE and whatever, I would be focused very much on highly automated AI tech and automation and machine learning in order to manufacture low volume, so automate low volume production. Because you'll be making 5s, you'll be making 10s, you might get to make 100. But it's that fluidity and that flexibility of a manufacturing process to actually be able to cope, rather than thinking you've got to automate when you get to the 100,000 mark. Think how you would automate low volume and how those machines would reconfigure themselves, because the machine tool trade and the manufacturing trade hasn't looked at that yet. I would say that we've had CNC lathes for 50, 60 years. They've just decided it'd be a good idea to change the jaws, much as they change the tools. Because people have been changing the jaws in between batch work ad infinitum for the last 60 years. So there's a driver. James, would you like to make a comment? I can see you.
I would just like to, I sense your frustration. Sorry, I'm from the Manufacturing Technologies Association. And I'm sure that many people are aware that the technology, often not deployed in the UK, the technology available to automate small batch work is jaw-dropping. It's absolutely there, and it's been there for many years and often deployed by the larger companies. But the opportunity for small companies is enormous, and even with the elevated interest rates, they're still low. And I cannot understand why everyone isn't completely re-equipping their factories and getting on with it, frankly. But obviously, don't quote me on that.
A lot easier to build automation in at the start than...
Yes, and I think I would basically say that if we don't go down that route, we will just not compete.
Yeah, it's not a choice.
No, it's not a choice, but it is that automation of low volume.
So, same question to Scott. How would you get involved with Darchem?
I'd look at the civil, nuclear and SMRs as a new startup. And I'd look at their technologies not on nuclear island to start with. So I would be looking at the balance of plant and building up that rich project history on SMRs and civil nuclear, and then entering the market that way. I think that's where you're going to get some more wins up front, and you're going to develop that history that is required and experience for yourself as well. So if I was in your shoes, that's exactly what I would be doing.
Thank you. And Nick, from AWE's viewpoint, one of the bigger purchasers.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for the question, Mark. First and all, I think it's a really interesting point to get involved in. So I think for us, simply put, to keep it the right side of security, if you think of what AWE does as a space program, we have a launch date that we can't change. That's set in stone, but I can trade on other things. So for me, it's very much that low volume, very, very high precision manufacture. Anything that we can get around process improvements around that, process optimization to decrease our production line times, anything in that space would absolutely be of interest for us and worthy of a conversation.
Great, thank you. So I think we've got time for one more question. I got overexcited in asking mine. We got one over at the by the window there.
Thank you. Thank you for the panel this morning. One thing we haven't touched on today is the commercial challenges of doing work in the nuclear sector. I'm just interested in hearing the panel's thoughts on that. The nuclear supply chain, if we go back over a 15, 20-year period, there have been an awful lot of casualties. A lot of companies have gotten heavily into this and have frankly gone bust as a result of that. A lot of the tenders that come out of the nuclear industry and the contracting frameworks that support them are very, very onerous and very difficult, particularly for SMEs, to address as a barrier to entry. And at 35,000 feet, if we think about what we heard this morning, Trump is highly likely to extract himself from the Paris Agreement, which underpins the 1965 Nuclear Installations Act in the UK, which is the insurance backstop for all of the liabilities in this area. do we get a sense that, the principal primes in the nuclear industry are really waking up and have an appetite to change their contracting positions, how they tender for this work, and the liabilities that sit behind some of the tenders? Thank you.
So should we, Vince? Do you want, as a survivor, do you want to
Survivor,
give us your opinion, and then maybe we go to Tom to see what's happening within the sector?
Yes, we've sat with the 1965 Nuclear Installations Act, which has been probably part of our saviour from actually getting insurance as much as anything. It basically says that as a manufacturer of component parts that go in there, you're not held liable, which you have to explain that to insurers, because very few people will insure you if you've got nuclear. It's getting easier because it's getting more acceptable generally. From a contracting terms, yeah, we've just accepted the risks because we've got confidence that we're going to actually deliver. But yes, it is onerous. And the other thing from a survival point of view is you've got to be in it for a long time. It's no good basically basing your business thinking, okay, I'll start up today and I'll get a contract next week, and basically it's years. Yeah. So and then it's hard. It takes a lot of time and tenacity to stay with it, and it's the same, to be honest, in the defence side. It's very similar. And we've been, again, through Make UK Defence, the conversations that have been going on around contractual terms with the MOD and cascaded down, it's the same. So, I don't know, wherever you get public procurement involved, it can be very difficult.
And Tom, is anything being done to address the convoluted?
Yeah, I mean, look, also, I know we've discussed this before, haven't we, about some of these issues, and there were a number of projects which were mooted and got to a certain stage and then didn't happen, and there were casualties from those. And this goes back to a point I haven't made yet today, but made in the discussions in November about why, targets are all well and good, but actually it's projects you need. It's projects that form the programme that actually will drive the real level of investment at SME and even some larger companies to actually have the confidence to do it. And the problem with that is, as you reflected, the lead-in times are so long that that either means you're going to have a long period from when you're having an actual decision on a project before anything can really happen. So then people say, well, this nuclear stuff, it takes far too long, on one end. Or you have what actually happened before, which is trying to get ahead of that, but then you're doing it ahead of a final decision, and then huge amounts get lost. I think the difference, though, between having this conversation when I remember having it with you maybe about 5 or 6 years ago and now is that what we need in terms of power, it doesn't matter whether it's relevant to or related to climate challenges as much, in terms of basic energy security and core energy security, and a realisation in a world where you have ships that can go around with suspiciously long anchors trawling across the seabed, you can't offshore energy security. And that's something which not just the governments, previous government, current government in this country, but governments across Europe and around the world are, if they weren't already awake to it, are very, very awake to it and aware to it now. And I think that is a difference that actually will drive lots of other differences and other changes. And on the point about trying to get into it and all of the sort of qualification, some of the stuff that was announced by the government 2 or 3 weeks ago on nuclear, which was around about regulation and permitting and those types of issues, that is also driving from some of the larger entities in the sector a reassessment of how some of those barriers to entry, how real they are and how they can be addressed. And so I think, I generally tend to be quite optimistic, but I do think actually that necessity is driving changes in behaviour in that way, which I think should be a good thing for your business and other businesses as well.
Great, thank you. Just as we are running out of time, what I'll ask all of our panellists to do is, if you have a couple of final thoughts for us, just if you take a minute to just give a summary to our audience, let us know. Should we start with you again, Tom, and then give you a rest?
Thank you. Look, I'm really pleased to see this room so busy. And I hope that within this room I recognise some faces, but I don't recognise everybody. So that suggests to me there are some people who aren't yet involved in nuclear that are here. And that's very good. Because to reiterate what I was saying before, of course there are challenges, of course there are complications, there'll be frustrations. But if you look at the big picture on this, across civil and defence, there is a lot that has to happen in a relatively short period of time. There are real opportunities, and I think, you know, there are, for those that want to get involved, there are ways to get involved, and you will reap the rewards for it.
Excellent. Thank you. Vince?
Yeah, I think the opportunities in the defence side with AWE, with Rolls-Royce, in the sub side, and also the other projects that they're developing for nuclear power of various forms, and AUKUS and things like that. So the defence side is quite exciting. In the civil side, you've got the decommissioning, you've got fusion, you've got the SMRs, you've got the AMRs, all coming along. I think from a energy security point of view, much as we've got to defend the nation, but from an energy security point of view, I think the drive for zero emissions, yes, we can have solar, we can have wind. If you're going to have that, you're going to have to back it up with a lot of oil and gas and fracking. So I think one's counterintuitive, really. So, I mean, I would just say keep building nuclear and build a lot of it very quickly.
Correct.
Stuff. Scott?
We've spoke about the opportunities in defence, civil, nuclear, SMRs, and hopefully we've kind of convinced you that nuclear must be part of your long-term business strategy, because it absolutely is for Darkham. We are absolutely 100% committed to nuclear, defence, civil, SMRs, decommissioning. What I'd encourage you to do is innovate, collaborate with the person sat on your right, with the person sat on your left. It's strength in numbers, and that's how we're going to get these things built and get them across the line. And diversify your organisation. Don't focus on solely on defence. Look at civil, nuclear, the SMR, technology race, and succession planning. I think those things combined, you'll have a great future.
Great, thanks, Scott. And Nick?
Thanks, Scott. So, I mean, for me, I think it's exciting but challenging would be the way I would sum it up at the moment. I think what has dropped within the MOD and AWE is the need to move away from customer-vendor relationships. They recognise that those will not work, will not deliver. In order for it to be a resilient supply chain, it needs to be a collaborative supply chain. And I think probably the closing thing from me is very much, look, we're here, we are present at these now. Please come and speak to us. We can answer questions. We can hopefully bust some of the myths. But yeah, in summary, I think it's a hugely exciting time. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and I think there's a lot of opportunities for SMEs to get involved in that. Fantastic.
Thanks, everyone. Will you all be around for the rest of the event? I think, Tom, do you have to shoot off, or are you? But the rest of Vince, Scott, and Nick will be around for the event, so you can always collar them over lunch. Very clear, there is a lot of optimism within the sector. A lot of the key decisions that had not been made last October, November time, they're starting to be made. Money is being unlocked. There is a need for the sector, an ongoing need. And I think what we've hopefully showed you here is that the nuclear sector is not as scary as it might seem. Running through, I mean, all of our panellists really reinforced that what you need is excellence within business, that ongoing commitment to be part of that sector. Not so much the certifications and accreditations you have, the standard ISOs, AS standards, and your cyber security, very much needed. But beyond that, it's that corporate culture that wants to be a part of this, and that long-term planning, and a resilient business really is what you need to be part of the sector. I'd like to thank all of the panellists. You've been absolutely amazing once again, and it's been a privilege to chair for you. Thanks to the audience as well for being part of this. From here, you can move downstairs to the Fleming Auditorium to hear about how to make the most of your membership at Make UK. Go on to the St James's room on this floor to hear about creating a culture of safety, or go to the Westminster room for how to give your organisation a competitive advantage, quite useful. Or come downstairs and find us at stand 30, right next to the pastries in the small room off to the side. Grab a pastry, talk to us about how to become a Make UK Defence member, and hopefully chat with some of our panellists as well. Thanks for attending, and have a great day.